The Great Archive of Prime was the oldest building in the galaxy. Its walls held the memories of 1,000 dead civilizations, and its keepers had guarded those memories for 12,000 years. The Galactic Concordance, a union of 17 different alien species, considered this place sacred. Here, all knowledge was preserved. Here, nothing was ever forgotten. Archivist Al walked through the cold corridors with slow, careful steps. He was a being with blue skin that glowed softly in the dark and 4 thin arms that moved like water. His people had always been the keepers of knowledge, and Al took his duty seriously. He knew every shelf, every crystal, every forgotten corner of this ancient place. Today, however, he found himself drawn to a section that most archivists avoided. The Forbidden Wing held records that were considered untrustworthy, stories that were too old or too strange to be believed. The crystals here glowed amber instead of blue, marking them as questionable. In the deepest corner sat a single pedestal holding a data crystal so old that cracks had begun to form in its surface. The label was written in a language that predated the concordance itself. It said simply, "The Terrans." Al had read these records many times. They spoke of a species from a small blue planet circling a yellow star. These beings, also called humans, were strange creatures full of contradictions. The records said they could commit terrible violence, yet also show deep kindness. They built great empires and then destroyed them. They fought wars that their world, yet they also created beautiful art and music. According to the texts, humans had learned to travel among the stars about 15,000 years ago. They had spread across their solar system, then moved to other stars. And then, according to every account Al could find, they had simply vanished. Some scholars believed they had destroyed themselves. This happened to aggressive species sometimes. Others thought they had evolved into something beyond physical form. But most scientists in the concordance believed the simplest explanation: humans had never existed at all. The Terran records were fiction, stories made up by some long-dead civilization for entertainment. Al was not convinced. The details in these records were too specific. The descriptions of human bodies, their strange red blood, their 2 eyes facing forward, their 2 legs and 2 arms, all of it felt like genuine observation rather than imagination. Different sources from different times and different species all described the same things. And then there were the warnings. Every ancient text that mentioned humans included some version of the same message. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness. Do not think their patience will last forever. When humans go to war, they do not stop until the enemy is completely destroyed. Such warnings would be pointless for a species that never existed. A priority alert suddenly echoed through the archive's communication system. All senior archivists were being called to the council chamber immediately. Something had happened at the frontier of concordant space. When Al arrived at the chamber, he found it packed with representatives from all 17 member species. High Counselor Ash stood at the central platform. He was a large reptilian being with scales that changed color with his emotions. Right now, those scales shifted between red and orange, the colors of fear and anger. The holographic display behind him showed a map of Concordance territory, a region near the edge of the galaxy, normally considered worthless, now pulsed with crimson light. The head returned. A wave of terror passed through the assembly. There were monsters, a species of horrors that existed only to consume and grow. They had swept through the galaxy 40,000 years ago, nearly wiping out all intelligent life before mysteriously retreating to the void between galaxies. The Concordance had been founded partly to prepare for their possible return. That preparation now seemed completely inadequate. The tactical reports were devastating. They had already consumed 3 frontier colonies. They were advancing toward more populated systems. Their numbers were estimated in the billions, and they moved faster than any defense force could respond. Al listened as military commanders discussed strategies. Each proposal sounded more desperate than the last. Evacuation was impossible on such a large scale. Direct combat had proven useless because they simply absorbed their losses and used the genetic material of their enemies to create new soldiers. Even the Concordance's most powerful weapons could not stop an enemy spread across dozens of star systems. The meeting ended with no solution. Al returned to the archive with his mind racing. There had to be something in the ancient records, some weapon or strategy that the ancestors had used to survive the first invasion. He searched for 3 days, barely stopping to rest or eat. On the third day, he found what he was looking for. The record was damaged, broken by time and perhaps deliberate destruction, but the important information remained. During the first invasion, when everything seemed lost, help had come from an unexpected place. A fleet had appeared from an unknown region of space, ships of strange design crewed by beings the ancient had struggled to describe. They walked on 2 legs like the account said, but they were soft-skinned and warm-blooded. They called themselves human, and they said they had been watching us for a very long time, waiting to see if we were worth saving. When they came, they decided we were. The record described the battle that followed. The humans had weapons unlike anything the ancient civilizations had seen, technologies that seemed to break the laws of physics. They had driven them back to the void between galaxies, then followed them there to make sure they could never return. But the humans had come back briefly to deliver a message. We will be watching. Build something worth surviving for, and we will be here if you need us again. And then they had vanished, leaving only legends and warnings behind. Al stared at the record for a long time. Then he began searching for any clue about where the humans had gone, any coordinates or star references that might reveal their location. He found nothing certain, but there were hints that humans had established themselves in a region of space the Concordance had never explored, a nebula near the center of the galaxy that ancient travelers avoided because of dangerous radiation and gravitational problems. The shrouded expanse. It was a desperate idea, probably a fool's mission, but as reports of horrors continued to flood the communication networks, Al became convinced it was their only chance. He brought his findings to High Counselor Ash, who listened with doubt but also desperation. A single scout ship was authorized to investigate the shrouded expanse, while the Concordance's remaining forces prepared a defensive line that everyone knew would fail. The scout ship departed within the hour, carrying with it the hopes of 17 species and one archivist's desperate prayer that the legends were true. Al watched the ship disappear into the stars. Somewhere out there, hidden in a cloud of cosmic dust and radiation, the humans might still exist. They might still remember the promise their ancestors had made so long ago. And if they did, perhaps the galaxy still had a chance. Commander Liam Porter stood on the bridge of the USS Endeavour, watching the swirling chaos of the shrouded expanse through the reinforced window. The nebula's radiation created false readings and phantom signals that kept his crew constantly alert. They had been operating in this region for 3 weeks, and he was beginning to wonder if the mission was nothing more than a waste of time. The Endeavour was one of humanity's finest vessels, a Vanguard-class explorer designed for deep space operations far from known territory. Her crew of 800 represented the best the Terran Republic could offer. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and diplomats, all trained to handle whatever the universe might throw at them. They had handled quite a lot over the past 15,000 years. Humanity's journey to this point had not been easy. After their first expansion into the cosmos, they had encountered the swarm and nearly been destroyed. The war had lasted 2 centuries and cost billions of lives. Victory came only through sacrifice, creativity, and a determination that still marked human memory. After driving them back, humanity had retreated from galactic affairs. They had watched as new civilizations arose, as the concordance formed and expanded, as the galaxy slowly healed from the wounds of the Great War. They had intervened occasionally, quietly, guiding the younger species away from the worst mistakes while respecting their right to develop on their own. The shrouded expanse had become their home, hidden from outside observation by natural barriers and carefully maintained technology. Here they had built a civilization their ancestors would not have recognized. Material needs were met automatically. People were free to pursue whatever brought them happiness. War was a distant memory studied by historians rather than a present reality experienced by soldiers. Liam was one of those historians turned soldier. He had spent decades studying analyzing their tactics and biology, preparing for a threat that most humans hoped would never return. When monitoring stations detected the swarm's emergence at the galactic rim, he had volunteered immediately for the observation mission. Now he waited and watched, gathering information on an enemy that humanity had hoped was gone forever. Lieutenant Commander Sophie Grant approached him with a data pad. She was his second in command, a compact woman with short auburn hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had served with him for 15 years, and he trusted her completely. Long-range sensors picked up something unusual, she said, keeping her voice calm. Single vessel, unknown design, heading directly toward us. It's broadcasting on frequencies that haven't been used in thousands of years. Liam raised an eyebrow. Show me. The main screen shifted to display the approaching vessel. It was small, clearly built for speed rather than combat. Its hull was marked with symbols that stirred something in Liam's memory. That's writing, Sophie confirmed. They're sending a message on repeat, ancient galactic standard heavily accented. It translates roughly to, "We seek the Terrans, please help us." Liam felt his heart beat faster. This was the moment humanity had always known would come. The moment when their self-imposed isolation would end, and they would have to decide whether to rejoin a galaxy that had forgotten them. "Open a channel," he said. "Let's find out what they want." The ship responded immediately. A holographic image appeared on the bridge. The being that materialized was thin and blue-skinned, with 4 arms that moved frantically as it spoke. "I am Archivist Al of the Galactic Concordance," the being said, its voice shaking with what might have been fear or hope or both. "I have come seeking the humans, the Terrans of ancient legend. Our people are dying. They have returned and we cannot stop them. Please, if you are who I believe you are, we need your help." Liam exchanged a look with Sophie. 15,000 years of watching from the shadows. 15,000 years of carefully keeping their distance from galactic affairs. All of it about to change because of one desperate plea from a being who had found them by following legends most of his people considered fiction. "Archivist Al," Liam said, keeping his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "This is Commander Liam Porter of the Terran Republic vessel Endeavor. You found what you were looking for. We are human." The eyes went wide. His whole body seemed to vibrate with barely controlled emotion. "Then the legends are true. You exist. You actually exist." "We do, and we've been watching your people for a very long time." Liam paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Tell me everything about the invasion. Leave nothing out." For the next 2 hours, Al provided a detailed account of the invasion. The colonies lost, the failed defenses, the estimated enemy numbers, and their projected advance. Liam listened without interruption, occasionally telling Sophie to mark specific pieces of information for further analysis. When the archivist finished, he looked at Liam with desperation plain on his alien face. "Can you help us? Will you help us?" Liam was silent for a long moment. The decision was not really his to make. That authority belonged to the Terran Republic's governing council, but he could see the fear in Al's eyes. He could imagine the terror spreading across Concordance worlds as they advanced. "I'm going to bring you aboard our ship," he said finally. You'll give our intelligence officers everything you know about the current situation, and I'm going to contact my government with a recommendation that we get involved. What will you recommend? Liam thought about the history he had studied, the billions who had died in humanity's war against the. He thought about the civilizations that had risen in the thousands of years since, the art and music and philosophy that had enriched the galaxy even as humanity watched from afar. He thought about the concordance, imperfect as it was, representing the hopes and dreams of trillions of beings who simply wanted to live their lives in peace. I'm going to recommend that we finish what we started 15,000 years ago, he said. They should never have been allowed to survive. It's time to correct that mistake. Al stared at him with an expression Liam could not quite read. Wonder, perhaps, or maybe gratitude, or maybe simply the relief of someone who had carried an impossible burden and finally found someone to share it with. The legends said you would come back, the archivist whispered. They said that when the darkness returned, the Terrans would return with it. I believed. Even when everyone called me a fool, I believed. Liam allowed himself a small smile. Then your belief is about to be rewarded. Welcome aboard the Endeavour, Archivist. We have work to do. As the ship was brought into the Endeavour's docking bay, Liam turned to Sophie with a look that conveyed everything words could not. The galaxy was about to remember why humans had become legends in the first place. The Grand Assembly Chamber of the Terran Republic occupied an artificial moon circling the capital world of New Terra. Its domed ceiling displayed a real-time image of the galaxy. Humanity's territory glowed in soft blue light. The concordance shone in green, and the invasion pulsed in angry red. President Blake studied that red stain as representatives from across human space took their seats. She had been president for 12 years, longer than most before her, and she had always known this moment would come eventually. The had been wounded, not killed. Wounded predators always returned for revenge. The chamber fell silent as she rose to speak. 3 weeks ago, a vessel from the Galactic Concordance entered our territory seeking help. An archivist named Al had pieced together fragments of our existence from ancient records and made a desperate journey to find us. He came because his people are dying, and because the legends told him we might be willing to help. She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. They have returned. Their swarm currently numbers about 4 billion individual units spread across 37 star systems. They are advancing at a rate that will bring them to the Concordance's core worlds within 6 months. The Concordance's military forces cannot stop them. If nothing changes, we estimate total extinction of all concordant species within 2 years. Whispers rippled through the chamber. The representatives had all read the intelligence reports, but hearing the numbers spoken aloud gave them terrible weight. We face a decision that will define our civilization for generations, continued. Do we emerge from our isolation and engage with a galaxy that has forgotten we exist? Do we commit our forces to a war that is not, strictly speaking, our fight? Or do we remain hidden, secure in our technology and our defenses, while 17 species are consumed by an enemy we failed to destroy the first time? Representative Daniel Hayes from the colony world of Avalon rose to speak. He was old for a human, nearly 200 years, and his voice carried the weight of experience. Madam President, with respect, this seems like a simple calculation. They are a threat to all intelligent life. We have the power to stop them. Our ancestors made the decision to let them survive, and we've had 15,000 years to recognize that as a mistake. I say we correct it. And what about the concordance? Asked Representative Maria Santos of the Mars Collective. If we help them, we reveal ourselves to 17 species who have believed us to be myths for thousands of years. We invite them into our lives, our territory, our affairs. Are we prepared for that? We can discuss diplomacy after we've made sure there's a galaxy left to have diplomacy in, Daniel replied. The debate continued for hours. Some representatives argued for limited help, providing weapons and information to the concordance while keeping humanity anonymous. Others wanted full engagement, using the crisis as a chance to establish humanity's place in galactic affairs. A small group suggested that help was unnecessary, that they would eventually tire themselves out, or that the concordance would somehow survive without assistance. Listened to all positions, weighing each argument against her own understanding of the situation. When the debate finally exhausted itself, she called for a vote. The result was overwhelming, 347 in favor of full intervention, 12 opposed, 4 abstentions. Then it's decided, said, the Terran Republic will go to war. She turned to face the galaxy map behind her, watching the red stain of territory pulse with evil energy. Admiral Porter, she said, addressing the military commander who had been watching silently from the upper gallery, you have authority to engage by any means necessary. The full resources of the Republic are at your disposal. End this threat permanently. Admiral Christopher Porter, Liam's father and supreme commander of human military forces, nodded once. He was a lean man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. His voice was cold as ice. The First Fleet will depart within 48 hours. The Second and Third Fleets will prepare as backup forces. I estimate total engagement time of 6 months, assuming no major surprises. And the Concordance. Commander Liam Porter and the Endeavour will serve as our first contact with them. We'll need to work with their remaining forces, mainly for evacuation and protecting civilians. They don't have the firepower to fight directly, but they can help reduce casualties among their own people. Nodded, make it happen, and Admiral, one more thing. Christopher looked at her with steady eyes. When you engage I want you to be thorough. No survivors, no hidden groups, no possibility that they can come back. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, you will make sure this is the last time humanity has to deal with this enemy. Christopher's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. It might have been satisfaction. Understood, Madam President, they will be eliminated. As the assembly dispersed, remained at the podium, staring at the galaxy map. 15,000 years of isolation were about to end. Humanity was about to step back onto the galactic stage, not as explorers or diplomats, but as warriors. She thought about the species that made up the concordance, with their 4 arms and glowing skin, the reptilian, the 17 different forms of intelligent life, each with their own cultures and dreams and fears, each facing extinction at the hands of monsters that humanity had failed to destroy long ago. This was not just a military operation. It was a debt being repaid, a promise being kept, a wrong being made right. Touched the glass dome above her, feeling the cold surface against her palm. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were dying. Somewhere out there, an archivist who had believed in legends was waiting to see if those legends would save his people. We're coming, she whispered to the stars. Hold on just a little longer, we're coming. In shipyards across human space, vessels that had not moved in centuries began to power up. Soldiers who had trained their whole lives for a war they hoped would never come received their orders. Scientists and engineers prepared weapons designed specifically to counter biology. The Terran Republic was going to war. And the galaxy was about to remember why humans had become the stuff of legends. High Counselor Ash had not slept in 3 days. The reports flooding into his command center were all terrible. More worlds lost, more populations consumed, more ships destroyed in hopeless defensive actions. The concordance was dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He was reviewing casualty figures when his aide rushed into the chamber with an expression close to madness. High Counselor, we're receiving an emergency transmission from the shrouded expanse. It's the scout ship, Archivist Al. He says he found them. He says the humans are real and they're coming. Ash felt his heart skip. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life. It showed Al standing beside a being that matched the ancient descriptions almost perfectly. 2 legs, soft skin, forward-facing eyes that held an intensity Ash found both terrifying and comforting at the same time. "High Counselor," the human said, his voice coming through the translation system with barely any delay, "I am Commander Liam Porter of the Terran Republic. We have received your archivist's request for help and have decided to honor the promise our ancestors made to yours. A fleet is being sent to fight the. We estimate arrival at your border in about 72 hours. Ash struggled to process what he was hearing. "You're real. The legends are true. You've been hiding all this time." "Watching," Liam corrected gently. "We've been watching, and we've seen enough to know that the Concordance, despite its flaws, represents something worth saving. Our fleet will handle the. Your forces should focus on evacuation and protecting civilians." "Our forces have been fighting for weeks," Ash said, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. "We have fought with everything we have." "I know, I've seen the casualty reports. Your people have been brave beyond measure." Liam's expression softened slightly. "But bravery isn't enough against the. You need weapons they can't adapt to, tactics they can't predict. You need us." Over the following hours, the Concordance's communication networks exploded with the news. The Terrans were real. Humans existed. The ancient legends were true, and help was coming. Reactions varied across the 17 species. Some celebrated, seeing the humans as divine saviors sent to rescue them in their darkest hour. Others worried about what price the humans might demand for their help. A few, especially among the more warlike species, felt shame that they needed rescue from beings they had dismissed as myth. But all of them watched when the first fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Concordance territory. There were 1,000 ships in the formation. They ranged from small corvettes barely larger than the Concordance's biggest vessels to massive dreadnoughts that understanding. The flagship, a vessel called the Resolute, measured nearly 50 kilometers long and bristled with weapons that Concordance scientists could not even begin to comprehend. Admiral Christopher Porter broadcast a message on all frequencies. "To all Concordance forces and civilian populations, we are here to help. Continue your evacuation plans and defensive positions. Engage the only if necessary to protect civilian lives. We will handle the rest." They seemed confused by the new arrivals. They had evolved to counter the strategies and technologies of their prey, constantly adapting to overcome any defense. But the humans were something they had never seen before, an enemy that had fought them in the past and won. The first battle happened in the system, where a fleet of about 2 million units was preparing to attack the archive world. The human response was fast and brutal. From the bridge of the Resolute, Christopher watched as his weapons officers coordinated their fire. The humans had developed weapons specifically designed to counter biology, particle beams that disrupted their neural networks, gravity projectors that tore their ships apart at the molecular level, and something the engineers called cascade bombs, which triggered an uncontrollable reaction that spread from one unit to another like a disease. In 6 hours, the fleet was reduced to drifting organic debris. The pattern repeated across dozens of systems. Wherever they had established themselves, human forces arrived and systematically destroyed them. The swarm tried to adapt, to develop countermeasures, but the humans adjusted their tactics faster than they could evolve. Concordance observers watched in stunned silence as battles that should have lasted months were decided in hours. They saw human pilots fly missions that should have been suicide runs and emerge victorious. They witnessed technology that made their own ships look like children's toys. And they began to understand why the ancient texts had spoken of humans with such a mixture of awe and fear. 3 months into the campaign, Christopher received a report that confirmed what he had long suspected. They had a central intelligence coordinating their actions, a queen mind hidden in a pocket dimension that could only be reached through a specific point in normal space. Destroy the queen mind, and the entire swarm would collapse. He assembled a strike force of the Republic's finest vessels and set course for the target. Before departing, he sent a message to Concordance High Command. "We've located the enemy's command center. We're going to destroy it. The remaining forces will become directionless and easy to eliminate. Your fleets should prepare for cleanup operations." Ash, watching the message from his command center, felt something he had not experienced in weeks: hope. "May whatever gods exist go with you, Admiral," he said to the empty room. On screens across 1,000 worlds, billions of beings watched as the human strike force disappeared into the void. They did not know what lay ahead. They did not understand the science or the strategies involved. But they believed. For the first time since the invasion began, they believed. The legends had returned. The Terrans had walked back into the fray, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if ancient promises would finally be fulfilled. The pocket dimension existed in a fold of space near the heart of a dying star. Getting there required precise calculations and technology that the Concordance could not have imagined. But for human engineers, it was just another problem to solve. Liam stood beside his father on the bridge of the Resolute as the ship crossed into the pocket dimension. What they found there was beyond anything their intelligence had prepared them for. The Queen Mind was not a single creature, but a vast network of connected nodes stretching across millions of kilometers. Each node pulsed with glowing energy, and the whole structure seemed to breathe with a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. "That's larger than we expected," Sophie said, her voice tight with concern. Christopher nodded slowly. "It's had 15,000 years to grow since we drove it back. Our ancestors were thorough, but not thorough enough. Can our weapons destroy something that size?" "They'll have to." The battle that followed would be remembered in human and concordance histories for thousands of years. The Queen Mind defended itself with everything it had. It spawned new units from its nodes faster than they could be destroyed. It projected energy attacks that stripped the shields from human vessels in seconds. The Resolute took damage in the first hour. It lost its primary weapons array and 30% of its crew. Christopher continued to direct the battle from auxiliary control, his voice calm even as the ship shuddered under repeated impacts. Liam led a squadron of smaller vessels in a flanking attack, targeting the connections between nodes. The idea was simple. If they could isolate sections of the Queen Mind, they could destroy it piece by piece. In practice, it meant flying through a storm of biological weapons and energy blasts that killed half his squadron in minutes. But humans had always been good at adapting, at pushing through impossible situations, at refusing to quit even when every logical calculation said defeat was certain. By the fourth hour, the Queen Mind had lost 60% of its network. By the sixth hour, it was fighting for survival. By the eighth hour, only its core remained, a single massive node that pulsed with desperate fury. Christopher gave the order for the final assault. Every remaining human vessel concentrated fire on the core: particle beams, cascade bombs, gravity projectors. Everything in the human arsenal poured into that single target. The energy released would have destroyed a small planet. The Queen Mind screamed across frequencies that were not meant for sound. It was a death cry that echoed through dimensions and was felt by every surviving unit across the galaxy. And then it was gone, and the pocket dimension began to collapse. "All ships emergency exit," Christopher ordered. "Get us out of here." The fleet emerged into normal space just as the dying star behind them exploded, sealing the pocket dimension forever. Of the 1,000 ships that had entered the assault, 417 survived. The casualties were higher than any single battle in human history since the original war. But the enemy was destroyed. truly and completely this time. In the weeks that followed, human forces methodically eliminated the remaining units. Now directionless and confused without their Queen Mind's coordination, they were easy targets. By the time the campaign officially ended, not a single living remained in the galaxy. The Concordance celebrated with joy that lasted for months. Statues were built to honor the human saviors. Songs were written about the return of the legendary Terrans. Every species sent diplomatic messages, each one eager to establish relations with their rescuers. Humanity responded carefully. They had saved the Concordance, but they were not ready to fully rejoin galactic society. 15,000 years of isolation had changed them into something different from their ancestors, and they needed time to figure out what role they wanted to play in this new era. But they agreed to one immediate request. Archivist Al was invited to visit New Terra, to see the civilization his desperate journey had brought to the galaxy's rescue. Standing in the gardens of the capital city, surrounded by humans who greeted him with warmth and curiosity, Al thought about everything he had experienced. The legends had been true, but they had not captured the full reality of what humans were. They were soldiers who could fight with terrifying skill, yes, but they were also artists and thinkers, parents and children, beings capable of cruelty and kindness in equal measure. They had chosen to help not because they wanted power or payment, but because they truly believed the Concordance was worth saving. "Why did you come?" he asked Liam, who had become something like a friend over the past months. "You could have stayed hidden. You could have let us die and remained safe in your nebula forever." Liam thought about the question for a long moment. Because that's not who we are. Maybe it's not who we've always been, but it's who we've become. 15,000 years ago, our ancestors were afraid, desperate, willing to do terrible things to survive. Now we can afford to be better, and part of being better is helping others when they need it. Al nodded slowly. The ancient texts warned us about humans. They said you were dangerous, unpredictable, that your kindness should not be mistaken for weakness. And what do you think now? I think I understand. The warnings were not meant to frighten us. They were meant to remind us that mercy is not the same as inability. You chose to save us when you could have easily let us die. That choice is what makes you truly powerful. Liam smiled, an expression Al had learned to recognize as genuine warmth. Maybe. Or maybe we just couldn't stand by and watch while people we'd been observing for 15,000 years got wiped out. After that long, you start to feel responsible for them. Like guardians watching over children. More like older siblings watching younger ones. We've made all the mistakes already. The least we can do is help you avoid making the same ones. Al looked up at the sky, where ships from a dozen species now moved freely through space that humans had secured for them. The galaxy had changed in ways that would take centuries to fully understand. The myths had become reality. The legends had walked among them. Nothing would ever be the same. But as he watched a human child playing in the garden, laughing with simple joy at some game, Al found he was not afraid of that change. The Terrans had returned, and they had proven themselves worthy of the legends. Perhaps, with their guidance, the rest of the galaxy could learn to be worthy too. The ancient texts had been right about one thing above all else: humans were worth believing in. And now the whole galaxy believed.